welcome to Slayerfest 98. I'm your host, Ian Carlos Crawford, and joining me as my lovely co-host, she is a poet, a doctor, a professor, and my best friend,
Kimberly and Southwick.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, so happy to be here and so happy to have our two guests with us today. We have senior reporter at Buzzfeed News,
Ellie Hall.
Hi, Ellie.
Hello.
And we also have staff writer for The New Yorker magazine,
Emily Nussbaum.
Hello.
Fabulous.
I'm so happy to have both of you here. We're going to be discussing Buffy Season 7's Lies My Parents Told Me. But before we get into that episode, Ellie, do you want to give us your Buffy origin story?
I would love to. So my Buffy origin story is that I was in my first year of college, and I had to take an intro to television studies class to fulfill one of the requirements for like my language arts umbrella major.
Okay.
And we watched an episode of Firefly during one of the classes, and I had never seen any television like that before. And I went, "Who is this? Who's the person who made this?"
Mm-hmm.
I watched all of Firefly. I watched Serenity, and then I fell into Buffy, and it's been the show that's had the most impact on my life. I switched majors so that I could study television studies, and I spent 2 years working on an honor thesis about Joss Whedon, and I got my college to pay for me to go to Comic-Con, which remains one of my biggest accomplishments.
That's
amazing. Ellie, the first time I ever had someone the first time I ever went to Comic-Con for free was the year we worked Comic-Con together for BuzzFeed.
That was such a great time, and I was so tired at the end of it, but it was glorious.
It really was, right? I remember I interviewed who was it? Lucy Liu and Johnny Lee Miller. I recorded it, and then the video card said "file corrupt," and it deleted the whole video interview, and I wanted to die, but it was a fun weekend. Emily, you've been on for pretty consistently since season 5. When I asked you what season 7 episode, you picked this one, but tell us,
Okay, so the reason I picked Lies My Parents Told Me is that I thought it was Conversations with Dead People. Just flat out, like, they have a similarity in terms of the name of them sounded similar to me, and I hadn't watched season 7 in forever, and so I kind of just conflated them into my head. And I remember Conversations with Dead People very fondly, so I was extremely surprised to watch this episode. But I have to say, it is a fascinating episode, and once I started watching it, I remembered what was powerful about it. I do think season 7 is a pretty messy season of television, but and this is not the greatest episode in the history of Buffy, but the parts that are good are extremely pungent and strange, and sort of shook me up rewatching them.
Yeah, same. And also, hilariously, I thought that this was Conversations with Dead People too. When you come on.
I love this fact. I just find that so funny. The fact that two people, there's something clearly about this that just, it's like a Ben is Glory situation where the minute you hear one title, it just switches to the other title.
Well, it's funny because when I DM'd Ellie and I told her about the episode, she was like, "Oh my God, and what a good episode to have me on." I was like, "That's so weird that they both love this episode so much." All right, that's cool.
We're just huge Robin Wood fans.
Yeah. So this episode opens, we've already gotten the info that, like in previous episodes, that Robin's mother was Nikki. They recast because apparently the person they had cast as Nikki in the Fool for Love was just like a stunt person. So they wanted to cast like an actor. I do think she's really good. Did it like throw any of you? Do you remember watching it and being like, "Wait, who's this?"
I mean, it didn't throw me. I mean, I think she's fine in the role. She has a lot of charisma on screen, but it is sort of a frustrating thing because when I look at Robin's backstory, I feel like in an abstract way, it works great. But in practice, it feels kind of dead to me. It's never really, it makes complete sense. He's planted at the beginning of the season. Then it turns out that Nikki was his mother. The story of what happened with Nikki is really tragic, and it has this incredible potency because of that scene that we've seen from the past. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. Like there are moments that work, but it all feels kind of artificial to me, even when I watched the episode. And I think the kid, by the way, who played the young Robin was terrific because he just has this very brief moment, but it's very poignant and it's not oversold and it's terrific. But I'm just being frank. Like it's one of these things where it's like, I feel like I should like it. And they've sort of done the work of plotting it out, but it never pops to me as a story. And I often forget about it.
Yeah. The only sort of thing about this plot point that I remember when I watched the first time, I was like, ooh, this is a good line. And it was actually in the previously on Buffy the Vampire Slayer for this episode when he comments on Spike's coat.
Yeah.
I got it in New York.
Yeah.
Like, that was a cool moment, but
Kim, what do you think?
I mean, I guess I also have to admit that it's not a plot point from this season that I remembered very well. And considering it's such a big deal to a character who, you know, is important to season 7, it didn't strike me as what's the word that I'm looking for? It didn't necessarily strike me as not working, though, for me in the same way that it seems to have struck Emily, for sure.
I have to say part of it is just in the doing of it. Like I love who's the actor who plays Robin? I think he's really good.
DB Woodside.
Yeah. I think he's wonderful. I think he's warm. I think he's attractive. I think he's like has great charisma on screen. Like I think it's good casting. So I'm always sort of surprised that it doesn't work for me. But there's a scene in this where he's holding the Spike at the beginning and Spike comes up and he's like just waiting for the right moment. And I was like, come on. It's like it doesn't trust the viewer for a second that we all understand that he's
surprised at that line too, for sure. Yeah, it struck me as like we could have figured that out on our own for sure.
I thought it was really dramatic. Like the first shot before the credits begin with like he's clutching the stakes so hard, blood is running down his finger.
Right. And I thought that from the fact that we have seen the flashbacks and that he's clutching the stakes so hard that we could probably figure out that he's restraining himself and wants to kill Spike. Like I didn't think we had. So I actually felt enormous sympathy for the actor because I was like, who could deliver this line and have it work? So at that point in the episode, as I was rewatching, I was like, wow, I really should have picked conversations with my. Because I was like, this is not working. But then. I felt like this episode picks up and becomes very powerful. But at the very beginning of it, it was sort of confirming in this condescending way my most like dismissive feelings towards season 7, and then I felt like it clicked and came together.
I think that the flashbacks and the flash forwards, and that we get all 3 time periods, and a lot of the parallels that I'm sure we'll talk about, really help it come together outside of those first scenes.
Yeah. I was we'll get there, but like, everyone's a writer in this recording. So I was going to like, I do think that writing is pretty tight with the going back and forth.
It's a good standalone episode. Like even if you've never seen Buffy, you can sort of be dropped into this episode and see the whole arc happening.
Yeah.
Especially in the Spike stuff, it's pretty amazing because you actually, he has a very complicated timeline, and a lot of it has come through in other flashback episodes from literal seasons before, but it still feels coherent.
Yeah, so. It really does. And it's so weird that, like, rewatching it, I forgot that we only see him and his mother in this opening. Like, that's it. I thought in my brain, there was a lot of flashbacks of, like, them together. But I don't know that we needed more, right? It's like, you get it. That's his mother. She was a Slayer. Even if you've never seen Fool for Love, you get that she was murdered by that vampire, right? Like, so you don't need more. I would have liked more, but, and I thought they did like the outfitting for the 70s looks. I do like that. And I'm a walking parody, and Punk Spike always does it for me.
Oh yeah, no, he's incredible. It's incredible.
Which I will say, I told James Marsters that was like a very big deal for young Ian, and he was like, "Well, you have good taste," so I feel validated.
And that's the thing. And once I realized what this episode was, once I realized what the show was. No, once I realized that's how much my memory has gone. I don't even remember Buffy the Vampire Slayer. No, once I realized what episode this was, I was so into it because my favorite thing is is Spike changing from one version of himself into another. It's just one of the most powerful parts of the show that was not part of the original conception of the show and comes to fruition in this. It's incredible. And he is so good. Oh my God.
Yeah.
He's one of like, I think he's, am I gonna? Yes, I think that I will say him and Anthony Stewart Head as well, but he gets more depth to bring. I think he's one of like the best male actors on the show. Like I cannot believe he also didn't go on to do a lot of other things.
And he has to do so many different things. Like in this episode,
Yes.
especially the point when he's playing, it's so complicated. When he plays the newly vamped Spike, who still has feelings for his mother and is sort of in between the selves that he is. It's really impressive. And I've always loved this aspect of the show that the punk Spike, and you only figure this out later on, is just an overcompensatory cross-class, sexual form of cosplay for Spike that's taken over his persona, but is always an artificial reaction to being scorned. It's just, it makes the whole show's portrait of resentful male nerdishness, and you could include Willow in this too, feel like a thesis that runs through the show in a way that you would never think was true when you watch season 1. But that's one of the aspects of the show where it's like every Lego brick in that theme clicks together with Spike by the end.
Yeah, Emily, that's a very smart way of putting it.
And we're done.
And we're done. That's it. That's all I have to say.
I'm obsessed with this aspect of the show, particularly because I think it's one of the great television accomplishments of the show is to take something that was, yes, it was a theme in the sense that Xander is a character in the first season, but it was not something that was baked into the DNA of it, like baked into the DNA. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't a given that this would be what would happen. But it slowly moves through. And, I, as well as many other people, often favor the early seasons, but this is one of those things that actually really comes out in the late seasons, because the triad in season 6 and the development of Spike's character and all the changes with Willow also are what make this possible. And it's interesting because it ends up seeming as important a theme in the show as the central theme about Buffy reaching adolescence by dealing with all of the patriarchy as a series of demons. Like the two things run in tandem, and the second, the sort of angry nerd one ends up feeling as important as Buffy's.
Emily, I feel like do a TED talk on Buffy, and I'll come to that.
It's very nice. It's nice to talk about because I haven't been sitting around talking about Buffy, so it's fun.
And I think you haven't. I think it has been since like the beginning of season 6 that you've been on our show, so it's probably like almost 2 years, maybe 3. Yeah.
And what a 2 years it has been. Anyway, I'm sorry. I don't want to hog all this space.
I was going to point out, I think you are right. They use that like very cute child just perfectly. Like they don't make the scene with him and his mom too precious, but it is still like well done and precious, but not like over.
It's poignant.
Yeah. Yes. So then we cut to like we get, like you said, him saying like, I'm waiting. It's like, all right. But I'm a sucker for like, ooh, that person's clutching their thing so hard they're bleeding. I always liked that, like in a movie or TV show, even though it's like there was a lot of blood coming out of there. Like,
nobody was like, Robin, did you see a doctor?
Like, are you okay? So post credits, we get Buffy and Robin in his office. The previous episode was Storyteller. I guess we're supposed to assume that Andrew's tears did help quell the Hellmouthy activity, but it's not quite completely close. I wasn't quite sure. This is where the storytelling gets a little clunky season wise, because it's like, well, we're done the season in 5 episodes. We know the Hellmouth can't actually be shut. But I guess it's like, in the previous episode, students were exploding, and now that's not happening. And I realize how stupid that sounds to say out loud. Andrew's tears help quell that. Like, what the fuck?
I love that scene.
They needed to just like remind us, I guess, that there's other bigger things going on, and then but that's kind of all on pause for all the jumping around in time we're about to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And so Giles.
By the way, it is so confusing in this scene if you don't remember very much about the first. People talk about the first one, and they're like, well, the first plan. I was like, wait, what was the first? The first one? It had a lot of people playing it. It has a plan. Anyway, the episode doesn't do a great job of helping you understand what's going on in that one.
I like, though, how we kind of could be Robin Wood, though, looking in and being like, okay, yeah, like, we're just as confused as he is about not just what's going on for everything, but also like specifically the stuff with Spike. And they're going back and forth between like his soul and the trigger and the chip.
Yeah, that was funny because they did one of those, the Bessel and the Pestles, like that was that kind of thing. Or it was a who's on first scene.
Yeah. And so we had talked about this in the previous 2 episodes, how it was weird. Giles is absent. Like he's living in that house, but he's absent from the last 2 episodes. They don't really ever say it, but then in this episode, she does say he was like the Seers and the Coven, and he went to go find a way to get rid of Spike's trigger. But more importantly, I do love the bit, and Buffy does this a lot, the show, not the character, but she's like, maybe everything's going to be okay. And then Giles comes in the office and is like, everything is terrible. Like, I do love when the show does that shit. And I do like when Giles is like in on the goofiness, because it's like he's just being silly about. And this is every discussion he had with Jenny Calendar in seasons 1 and 2 about like, not on computers, there's got to be books. And so basically Giles is very stuck on that. He mentions the Seers and the Coven. He's going to deactivate Spike's trigger. Buffy does I meant to look this up. Do any of you, who is Yul Brynner? Do we know who that is? Because I don't know who that is.
Yul Brynner from The King and I. He's the bald, handsome, charismatic actor who plays.
He's the king. He plays the king.
He plays the king of Siam. I mean, that's the role he's most known for. He was also, I can't remember what else he was in. He was in a TV thing also, right?
Okay, because she makes the joke, like an old stuffy British, old stuffy and British, like Yul Brynner. Like, I was like, all right, I appreciate the joke, even though I didn't know who the fuck that was. And then we cut to the basement, and they Giles has that weird thing that looks like a magical slug that goes into Spike's eye. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was a nice ripoff of Star Trek 2.
Yes, I was like, yes, it really was.
I was like, you got a worm, it's going into a head, you're going through the eye, not the ear, but we see the homage. It's fine with me. They did a nice job. Little glowworm.
I like how we get a couple different jokes. So Spike makes the joke about there not being room for his brain, and then somebody makes a joke about the size of Spike's brain. Ha ha ha.
I will say the scene, I did think they did a good job with it, but it was one of those classic hanging a lamp on it things where they're like, there's a lot of plots about Spike being, his having these various different things, like he's good, he's bad, he's controlled, he's not controlled. And so I felt like making jokes about it was a way of expelling the problem of having this weird on and off plots that were confusing and slightly overlapping by showing a character being confused by them.
Yeah. And this season, I will say, the thing I do love this season does, they make a lot of jokes about the plot. Like in the potential episode, when they think Dawn is the next potential Slayer, even though she's not, Anya and Willow have a back and forth where they're like, oh, I guess it makes sense. Remember that whole Slayer's blood thing with the key? And Anya's like, I never understood what that was. And
I am not a fan of this. I'm not saying,
really?
Yeah. I by the way, I do, like I said, I do think that the scene where they're like the trigger, the soul, and the chip, I think it works great. I think they deliver it well, and I think it's funny. But to me, it's what happened on Lost, where they start adding characters that kind of represent skeptical fans, and then they work to cathartically state and expel the doubts people have about the plot not making sense. And I'm just like a humorless viewer, and I'm like, no, just make plots make sense. You can't just make self-deprecating meta jokes about the plot not making sense. But if it works, I'll take it. And in this case, it works. So
okay. So we get, this is some weird camera work that Buffy didn't normally invest in, but I liked the we're turning to Spike and he's like, oh, it's not working. And we get the J.J. Abrams looking lens flare, and then poof, he's in his mother's living room, which then, Kim, what happens?
He's reciting poetry. I thought for sure that you wanted me to talk about the poetry.
I did. As the poet, as Slayerfest 98's resident poet, what do you think?
I mean, it was some drivel. drivel. His mother was right in the end. But no, I mean, I think that the scene in and of itself is necessary, and I like that we get. I mean, anytime you're going to put poetry on TV, even if it's not that great, like, yeah, do it.
So can I give a fun fact?
Yeah.
The woman who plays Spike's mother played Serena van der Woodson's grandmother on Gossip Girl.
Oh, that's so great. She is so good in this
Oh my
episode.
God, yes.
Yeah.
This is I mean, without her doing this incredible performance, this episode wouldn't work because it's incredibly devastating and poignant because she plays. You completely feel what Spike feels about her in both of the versions of her. She's great. No, I didn't know that. That's so funny about Serena's grandmother.
And it's a credit, right, Emily, to like, she sells both versions of the mother, the like sick, loving mother, and then the like soulless demon, like awful, weird, whatever's going on, incestuous mother. Like, she sells both, and it's only like, what, 3 scenes the mom's in, but she sells it, all of it, and it helps.
I will say the writing is also great for those scenes.
Yeah.
And it's also like the earlier version is this sort of Dickensian, almost parodically wonderful, sweet, slightly treacly mother, but also feels very real, like a real sick mother who he genuinely cares for. That makes you feel very heartbroken.
Yeah.
You can
It's always consumption.
Yeah.
Gotta be consumption. I feel like the setting and the costumes were really great too to add to all of that. Like there was like a certain warmth that you get from the room and from the way that they're both dressed at this point. And I think that really helped like sell everything that didn't even need to be sold anymore, but it did.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So I sometimes will get annoyed. People are a little precious about Spike. I love Spike as a character. I think I, of course, have issues with him. The thing people get most annoyed with this podcast is they feel that like I hate Spike. I don't. I just can point out his flaws. I felt myself becoming that fan that's like tweeting at my podcast being like, you don't like, I found myself becoming that person watching him. He's just so like tender with his mother and precious. And I'm just like, oh, this, and it's weird because he's like childlike, but he's clearly an adult man, but it's like very childlike with his mom. And I just found it very endearing. And I mean, you said before, Emily, like we know that the punk stuff is all a facade and he's just like puffing his chest, trying to be like quote unquote cool when this is like really him. And I find the fact that we go from this to what we get in season 7, just, I don't know. I find it very endearing for Spike. Like I was watching the flashback scenes being like, oh, this poor guy.
I think season 7 is the only season where we can see Spike have a sort of idea of healthy love. And we can argue it like at the end of the season, whatever he has with Buffy, that's a different thing. But he loves his mother in a pure way that we've never seen before. We didn't see that with Drusilla because that was toxic and all of the things that were in there. And then with Buffy, it's, at least in season 6, it's sort of more of an obsession.
Yeah.
Right.
But we see the Spike that can love here, and he's kind of like a sweetie.
And
right.
it also raises this real question about what it means to become a vampire, because there's this strange thing that runs through the show about, some people seem to bring something of themselves into their vampire self, and his motives for his mother in turning her into a vampire are pure. Like he doesn't want her to die. He wants to be with her. I mean, I was really surprised by how moving I found this part of it, especially given how critical I am of other parts of the episode. I'm literally, as we're talking, we're like, let's only talk about the scenes of Spike and his mother. Not that the other scenes had nothing that worked, but to me, this is one of those strange episodes where the one quarter of it that's about that is so far and away better than the rest of the episode that especially because it is shocking, but it's earned. Like it has everything in it feels that way. Whereas the other parts of the episode are more like it's a show with a plot and there are twists and they're trying to figure things out. But for instance, like Robin going after Spike, it just doesn't have that effectiveness. to me.
We will get there because I have a lot of thoughts about that.
Okay.
But so we get the mother, then she sings him this song, and we learn that's we kind of already knew because we had heard the song earlier in the season, but we didn't know what it was from, right? We learn it's his mother sang it to him. We flash back to present day. He's freaking out. He throws Buffy. He throws a bed. It hits Dawn. And this is a thing that the show does well too, where he's like, "Oh, shouldn't you go check on Dawn?" And she's like, "She's tough." And then we cut to Dawn going, "Ow," because she has like a cut on her head.
So we cut to Dawn. We need to talk about Anya's outfit.
Yes, yes. The other great part of the show, the most important part of the show.
What is it? The hat with flowers on it, the polka dots. Like, I took notes on this. I was like, we need to talk about this outfit.
I've said this the entire season. After Selfless, they very much didn't know what to do with Anya, but Emma Caulfield is so good. She steals every scene where they're like this, where it's like, give her 5 lines and that's all she does this episode. She still fucking nails it, but like, ooh, that outfit is...
This really, also in this scene, it's the combination of the outfit and her saying that thing where she's like, even if he killed 1,000 frat boys, well, you know, to forgive is human. Like, I was like, what are you doing? You're exactly right. Like, she had 30 seconds, she nailed it, and then she sort of, you know, blew on her fingernails and walked off set and was like, I own this episode. It was so good. But I love that outfit. Like, if it was just the polka dot top, that would be like, okay, she's wearing bright colors, but what the hell? That hat was like, what was it, a 20s flapper hat? Why would anybody be wearing that in the house?
It's like a swim cap. It's like a swim cap with flowers on it.
Yeah. So weird. I forgive the silly hat because I love that line when she's like blah 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 to forgive is human. Like
it's so good,
right? And that's like what we love about Anya is that she can be flippant about shit while still telling the truth, because she is telling the truth when she says Spike has a get out of jail free card with Buffy, because he kind of does.
I know, but she's a weird person to say it, as she herself recognizes as a vengeance demon. But I'm not even forgiving the hat. I'm like fully for it. It's actually also the only notable and good piece of clothing in this episode.
Ooh, Emily with the hot take. I love it.
I'm not saying that I didn't like Buffy's sort of white gossamer top in her scene with Robin, but it's just like very little stands out. Anya is like, I will be noticed. So.
And we love that. We love that. Yeah. So Andrew answers the phone. It's funny to see the characters that they like clearly had to have here, like Anya and Andrew. Like clearly, Andrew and Kennedy were like featured guest stars, so they had to be in it. And Anya's in the credits, but they all only get like 2 parts. And just Andrew's literal only scene is saying, "Willow, you have a phone call. Some effeminate guy named Fred," which is a joke that pays off if you've been watching Angel. And Willow has to leave. We know that. Did everyone, Kim, I know how you watched Buffy and Angel, but Emily and Ellie, did you both watch like both at the same time?
Yes, I knew it was a crossover situation. And I understand from reading online that this episode was delayed because of the Iraq War, is what I understand. Which is a surprising footnote to a show that seems to have nothing to do with what's going on. But like, it was supposed to, I guess, come before the Angel episode, and it came after, I guess.
Oh.
If I understood correctly.
That's I feel like I should remember that, but I don't remember that, but that makes sense. I remember being so excited that, I mean, Faith was on Angel, and like that being, and Emily, I feel like you'll remember this better as the capital T TV critic. Wasn't it like the deal WB and UPN made so that way they could have a crossover was like, we can share Faith and Willow. One of the characters has to go to Angel. That way Angel can come.
I believe what you say is true, but I don't remember the details. But yeah, that sounds right.
But yeah, I remember like reading about that and just being like so excited because after season 5, when Buffy went to UPN, I kind of, we get that scene in season 6 where like the like same Angel episode, he's like, I have to go see Buffy. And she's like, I have to go see Angel. And we just never addressed that. And I kind of thought that was going to be that forever. And I was very bummed that like, oh, it's a final season of Buffy, but we won't get a crossover. But then we did. Then also we get Willow saying she has to leave. Buffy, this is where we're getting complicated, where I will have my hot takes. When Giles is like getting mad at her, Giles isn't quite wrong, right? I don't know what everyone else thinks.
Wait, when he's mad at her you mean in the cemetery when they're fighting, or
Well, even before the cemetery, he says, like, think about what you're doing. Like, he doesn't even want her to unchain Spike.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. He's obviously right, except that Giles is the worst watcher in the history of time and space. So it's literally like Anya having correct things to say about Spike and then being like, you killed probably more people than Spike. So similarly, like, because I feel like ever since Buffy's mother died, especially, but it just in general, and even in rewatching the show, even though I like Giles, he's a terrible watcher who makes terrible decisions at all times, rarely protects her, often gives her terrible advice, and then abandoned her. So when he gets to this point and he's like, you need to make smart leadership decisions, which is this just beat they hit over and over again during the seasons, it's hard for me to listen to him because I'm like, shut up.
My hot take is that the only good thing he ever did was kill Ben Glory.
Yes.
Okay, wait, now we're all going to fight because I think Giles is the best. He's such a good, supportive dad to her.
He's a terrible watcher. I was literally rewatching with my children. We watched for the first 2 seasons or something. And I was like, it is astonishing how much he gaslights her nonstop. Like, she's like, there's a monster standing right there. And he's like, oh, Buffy, don't be foolish. It's time for us to practice. And she's like, it's a monster. And he's like, that's not a monster.
I have issues with him. The first issue I had with him was when she turned 18. Like, ever since that episode where he tricked her and set her up because she had to pass all these things without using her powers, I was like, if you were really, I know it's a watcher thing, but this is cruel.
Well, like I will even be okay with that because that literally was what that episode was about, right? Like his betrayal of her, which was required by his job. Like, I actually found that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I understand what you're saying, but that is literally what it was about. I'm talking about throughout his time with her. He does essentially smaller versions of the same thing every 20 minutes.
I mean, yes.
Kim, what do you think?
I was going to say, I feel like now that they're like both adults, like when she was younger, we could go back and we could argue about whether or not he's like, you know, replacement dad or absentee father. But I feel like now that they're both adults, they don't treat each other like two adults should treat each other. They're just not communicating effectively. And I think that's the problem with their relationship.
All right.
I'm sorry to have come down so strongly on this subject. I had no idea I had these feelings until I said them. But isn't that the way that podcasts work? So.
Right. Yeah. I just always go back to that season 2 episode, like when Angel has turned evil, you find out it's because they had sex and it's like her birthday. And he, at the end, he's like, if it's guilt you want, I'm not your man. Like I'm nothing but here to support you. And
it's a beautiful moment, undeniably. It's what keeps her attached to him when he makes all these other mistakes. But yeah, no, that's a gorgeous episode. You're right.
Yeah. So then we get another flashback and we meet Drusilla into this episode. So weird that she's, and again, in my memory of this episode, she was in like every flashback, but it's weird that they like had Juliet Landau on set for like 5 minutes. They were like, yeah, just real quick. Kim, I know you love Drusilla. We interviewed Juliet Landau together last year, 2 years ago. God, when? What is time? What did you think of this?
I just loved like Spike's like casual, like the 3 of us, and she's like 3.
Yeah,
like, you, me, and my mother, and like just like her like sort of slow backing away hesitation.
The way she says your mom, like your mom.
Yeah. Are you drunk? A little bit.
Yeah.
No, that's actually the mom in his conversation.
Yeah.
I think of it. But anyway, I just loved like before, like, you know, early Juliet, early Drusilla isn't as fun as like brain-addled Drusilla for me. But I do still think that that she just kills that little moment. Like, it's just so good.
I think she's so great in the scene. And she also has the best physical moment in the whole thing when she's rubbing her belly, which is so weird. When he's approaching his mom and there's a whole thing about, she's like, I'm really his mother because I made him.
Yeah.
They're just delving completely into this idea that sires are parents and that everything involves these parent-child relationships. And she literally is, I don't know what she's doing. Like, she's rubbing her belly as though she's a pregnant person or something like that.
Yeah.
is really creepy and classic Drusilla. Like when she does something, you're like, wow, you've just taken it one step too far.
Yeah, and like it's funny to see her. We don't often get Drusilla in the like, she's almost like the straight player in the scene where she's like, what the fuck are you talking about, your mom? Like, and we don't get Drusilla on the side of like her looking at someone like that person's being crazy, right? And I like to see that, like the opposite of what we normally get with her.
But Spike is so earnest and like not,
right?
You know, so earnest.
The contrast is I mean, a little heartbreaking because, you know, she's clearly evil and he's like, Mom, this isn't the way I was going to do it.
Yeah.
But I can cure you. You won't be sick anymore and we'll live forever.
I mean, the whole thing is heartbreaking because he's also truly sexually like just heightened by Drusilla, and he's finally experiencing this kind of adult sexual relationship, and he's so excited about it and kind of excited about them taking over the world and equally psyched about bringing his mom along. Like it just, that's actually kind of one of the best moments of his life. That brief moment before he actually vampires his mom, like he's like, this is great. I've got a girlfriend. I'm bringing my mom along, and now I have a sense of purpose. I'm getting revenge on all these snobs that put down my poetry. Like if you map out Spike's entire life, that might have been the only 15 good seconds.
God, seriously. And his earnestness, I mean, I think of like sometimes when something is like too earnest, I'm like put off. But I don't know. His earnestness here is it endears me to him even more. And like, I'm like this sweet man child who just, like you said, Emily, he's just like, I got a girlfriend, I got my mom, we're gonna take over the world. This is great. Like he's like very excited. And yeah, it's just like, well, we know everything's gonna go to shit after this. Great.
He seems confident in his skin. That's the thing. I actually went back and watched like the first scene where he was reading the poetry. And then this scene again, and even the way he carries himself. Like it's not just that his costume is looser and he looks more comfortable. He does feel like it looks like he's come into his own.
Yeah. He's almost unrecognizable in that first scene at first glance. Like if you didn't know it was him.
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
So then we cut back to Summer's house. Robin and Giles have this discussion, and I don't know. I know you said it doesn't quite land for you, Emily, but the Robin stuff lands for me because I feel like he has every reason to want to fucking kill Spike. Like and Giles is kind of right that Spike is a liability. Like we saw Buffy found the bodies he sired of the people he murdered under the first control. And while I understand her logic of he was not the one doing it, he was like a sleeper agent or whatever dumb bullshit excuse, but it could happen again. I don't know. Ellie, what'd you think of the Giles Robin convo here?
It's I mean, I think just because I am sort of already biased in Spike's favor after having seen all of this backstory, because when this happens, we can already see like, oh, Spike murdered his mom.
Right.
Like there's something going on here that's deeper than all of this. Anytime I see Giles go behind Buffy's back, it makes my heart hurt.
Yeah.
Just the whole idea that he is so convinced all the time that his is the only right answer. And he's the only one who can see things clearly. I don't know. It seems kind of manipulative to me, but it's also interesting because his mother, who we know from far behind the episode where Spike is fighting with Buffy and we see the first flashback, we know his mom was so disciplined that, you know, that was how Spike was able to beat her. And you can see that the Watcher relationship that Robin's mother had with her Watcher and that he had with her Watcher was very, very different. Like he doesn't seem to comprehend the idea that Buffy and Giles's Slayer relationship is different.
Yeah.
So I mean, I did see this as a sort of betrayal.
Okay.
I mean, it's a betrayal, but like a deeper than that betrayal because Buffy is nobody she can lean on. And like, that's been made very clear. She thought she could lean on Giles and then she can't.
I mean, right. And then they kick her out of the house in like what, 3 episodes from now. So yeah. Yes. Kim, what did you think of this? Them like plotting?
I mean, I liked that Giles got out of Robin that, like, he's in it for revenge. I thought that was important that we know, like, you know, he's, you know, for the greater good also, but also, like, you know, and I think that Giles really makes a decision there to kind of allow this guy not just to be rid of Spike for the greater good, but also, like, is acknowledging that it's for revenge, and that seems shady.
Yeah. Emily?
Look, my response to this is not about whether people's decisions make sense. It's literally the fact that I feel like there's something null about this plot, even though it all makes sense in theory. That's the way that I felt about their conversation. I was a little bored by it, which is weird because the stakes are actually very high and the actors are fine. It's really nothing, but I just feel like there's an artificiality to the whole thing. I will say that I also, it's absurd how much Giles lies to Buffy gratuitously. And I don't know. It's so strange. I don't know why I can't, like, the way that I feel about Spike's thing with his mom is very strong to the point that it haunts me during the conversations we're having about other parts of it. And whenever we talk about the stuff with Robin, and we're going to get to the scene where he fights him and stuff, it all just feels like plot mechanism to me. I guess I understand what you guys are saying about the ethical things and the Slayer Watcher relationship, but I have trouble concentrating on it because I don't think it works. And that's just a gut reaction.
All right. That's fair. So then that scene ends with like Giles kind of saying, what exactly do you propose? And then we cut to him and Buffy in the cemetery. And he's kind of like, he does have a very good line of like, oh, like the chaos in your life shows that I still need to impart some wisdom on you. And Buffy's like, impart away. Season 7 actually does this a few times. And I think it might even be because they had so many moving pieces in like every single episode leading up to the end, but they do a lot of like flashes to this, flashes to that, flashes to that. And it's like 3 different things all happening at once. It works for me. Like, I like that as he's telling her and she's joking about her own inspirational speeches, which that I will circle back to what you said earlier, Emily, about just make the plot good. I don't really love that she's making jokes about her own speech. It almost feels a little too like caving in on itself.
Yeah, part of the thing for me is actually that this entire season, I remember the first time I watched it being agitated by the constant discussions of what it means to be a general and head of war. Right. I just never got excited about that as a character arc for Buffy. So I just sort of zoned out during stuff like this. But I understand what you mean about the scene is actually pretty funny. And, look, I'm a sucker for all the scenes in which a random vampire banters with her while she's having a conversation. Like, it's just like, it's a Buffy classic that goes back to season 1. And that guy who played the vampire is very good, actually. Richard or whatever. I dug it.
The one thing about this scene for me that sort of, and again, this goes back to what I said, sort of about watching Giles betray Buffy is a little heartbreaking. The way I interpreted this scene was that she, again, like, she has a peer. She has somebody she can kind of lean to and joke for. She's letting herself step back into that student role, I think, because it's comforting to her.
Yes,
like, this is what she's been doing for the past 7 seasons. When she was in high school, she and Giles would go out and they would train. And I think she enjoys stepping back into that moment for a little bit because things are so crazy in her life. And I think that makes the betrayal even worse.
What's so funny about it to me is that the scene has occurred over and over again during Buffy where she is being stalled by somebody who's actually doing something to her in another place. Like it happens in the, it's like the climactic thing that happens in the first season all the time. And there is something darkly hilarious about the fact that it's Giles doing that to her because it's like, fall for it every time. It's just like, she's just always being isolated from the crowd, stalled with a bullshit story about something that she's supposed to be doing only to discover that they've kidnapped the people closest to her. And it's just happening again. So
Emily, I hadn't even thought about it, but you're right. That leads to like the iconic moment in season 2 when she's slow-mo running with the blue jacket because Angelus did the same thing.
Yeah.
Like
Angelus did it. Yeah. you fall for it. And the thing is, when you watch the first 2 seasons, he's right. Like she does fall for it every time. And it's because of, and this is a consistent thing in the show that's done very well, is that she is both isolated from people and she chooses to isolate herself and she refuses to collaborate and she insists on being like the one person who can save the world at the same time as she bridles at the burden of that responsibility. But strategically, it always screws her. And this is just another one of those cases. So
yeah, that's it. It's true. When we recorded the episode on Selfless, Buffy does have like and I've noticed like even the Buffy fans fall differently on that conversation she has with Xander and Willow, where she's like, I'm the law, I make the decisions. And they're kind of like, but when it's Spike, it's different. When it's Angel, it's different. But now that it's Anya, you're just going to kill her. And her like very much like, I cannot ask for help, I am a loner bullshit, when actually the reason she's a successful Slayer is because she's not alone, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But you're right, it is a consistent theme, and they do a good job of keeping it there. Like, it's never pretended to not be there. She has a really funny line too when she's like, "Do you see the way I treat my friends, my family, and Andrew?"
And Andrew?
I love how like Buffy of all of them is the one that like truly cannot stand Andrew.
Poor Andrew. Yes.
So, the vampire hand raises from the grave. We cut to Robin and Spike because, as Giles had mentioned, they were leaving him with Robin and that people in the house were relieved. And he says to Spike, like, "Oh, you live in a garage?" And he's like, "No, this is my sanctuary." We go in, we turn on the lights, and there's crosses everywhere.
I love that line. I thought that was funny.
Emily, did you have a rebuttal?
Yeah, no. It's not a rebuttal. I just thought it was a bizarrely over-the-top situation. Because it's like, is there anything suspicious about the fact that this space is filled with crucifixes? And
yeah. See, now this all works for me. Like, I kind of like D.B. Woodside's acting is very good because he's just very, "You killed my mother." Like, and Spike's like, "I killed a lot of people's mothers." And his delivery is very good. I like that he is very calm for this, but then we build up to like, when he's like punching Spike and he's like, "Is this how it felt when you stabbed my mother's neck?" And he's like screaming at him. And then, at the end, he's crying. Like, I feel like he does a very good job with all of this of like, Principal Wood is normally a very calm man, but like, understandably, when confronted with the vampire who murdered his mother, he is not so calm.
I liked the old iTunes. Like, I hadn't seen that iTunes.
Yes.
That was so nostalgic. He's like, "Hold on, let me pull up your little song." And it would have been even better if it was on what were they called?
Napster.
No, I was thinking if it was the
Apple ones?
the Apple, the thing that you used to carry around that had a spinning wheel.
Oh, an iPod.
An iPod. I think it would have been great if he picked up an iPod and been like, "Hold on." He was like spinning and spinning and spinning, trying to find it.
I love that you can see the AIM icon at the bottom of the page.
Yes.
When you open iTunes, it's like, oh, this is so nostalgic.
Oh, God, I use so many Buffy quotes in my aim away message.
By the way, it is so funny to me that I did think that D.B. Woodside was very good in the scene. It was so funny to me that he's like, "And I have set this whole thing up. I will bring him back there. I'm going to have this song all set up on cue because I don't want to kill him as a person. I want to kill him as a vampire." Like, it's just like, it's a very, you could just see him sitting around seething and being like, this needs to be exactly right. Like,
we get the playlist out. Like. Yeah. And so then we start the like cut. We get like, Spike has bitten his mother in the last scene, and we cut to a flashback of his mother entering the room looking healthier. And I feel so bad for him because he is, and it's like, he's a vampire in the scene. He should be soulless, but he's so happy that his mother is like healthy and like vibrant. And she even calls him tender, but we can tell it's a sinister, right? Like, she pauses before she says tender. And the mean shit she says to him like breaks my heart.
Drag it out.
Yeah, it's actually one of the most upsetting scenes in the entire series.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty big thing to say, but it's actually true. Like, I'd have to reach to find 5 scenes where people say something more heartbreaking and devastating than this. It's demented.
It's worse than like murder, if that makes sense. Just at least the way, not obviously, but like the way the show depicts dying. This is so deeply personal.
Yes.
And sexual and weird.
Yeah.
It's also great because it's very extreme, but it's a very realistic problem, which is that the idea that someone being very kind, who is your parent, could be concealing from you. That like it hovers in this weird way between the truth and something that is a thing a demon could say. And it's so well done that when he comes to the conclusion, this was just what the demon said, you really are left as a viewer in a very ambiguous state. Like, you can believe that he's delusional about that. I had this moment when I was like, maybe his mother is just saying this because she wants him to kill her. And so this is the best way, but that was like, that doesn't make sense.
Actually, I was going to ask what you all thought, because I wrote down some of her quotes. Like, she says, like, you slithered from me like a parasite, which is just like horrendous. And she's like, who could compare to your doddering housebound mom? Like, she just says all of this awful shit. And I was wondering, Kim, what do you think? Do you think that's her just becoming a demon, or that's like shit she was hiding from him as a human?
I'm going to cop out and say both, but I think that her sexualizing his feelings towards her, that's very demon to me. Because his acting, like James's acting there, like, that's not what Spike's doing. Like, he just loves his mom. So I think that maybe some of the other stuff, like, is you have the nice versions and the mean versions of the same thing sometimes, where you're just like, both of these things can be true at the same time. Like, he can be, I wrote down a quote, a limp, sentimental fool, or he could be a hopeless romantic, like, and maybe as his mother, like, she's worried that he's a limp, sentimental fool, but like at the same time, like, oh, that's just my son. He's a hopeless romantic. But as soon as she starts sexualizing things, I think that's definitely a demon when she gets all like Oedipal.
Yeah. So I'm not a mother, and that was sort of something that was continually on my mind, like the dichotomy between, yes, she's a demon, but also who you are as a mother, separate from who you are as an individual.
Yeah.
And like you said, Ian, sort of how much was her and how much was the demon. Mm-hmm. That particular thing is why I feel the same way, because did she probably always have some of these feelings? Well, you don't just become, your whole personality in life, you're still yourself when you have kids. I think, Emily, you referenced watching this with your children. So you have far more, you can speak to this far better than I can.
I have 2 teenagers. I became a vampire after I had children. So.
Okay. Good to know.
So if that, in that sense, if you change into a different person, no, I know. I agree with you. First of all, I think that was very insightful about what was being talked about before about the way it hovers between, you can interpret in different ways, but that the sexual part of it seems unconnected to his actual feelings, and it's such a cruel interpretation. But the general thing that was just being said about the idea that your parent is both your parent and that they have a separate self that is not only doing things for you, and that's painful and confusing, is what I thought was the really original theme of this episode. So anyway, go on with what you were saying, though, about the slithering and the horrible things that she says. What a mess.
Yeah, I do like the intercuts of, like, his mom says something terrible, and then we cut to Robin, like, punching him, because it's, yes, we all get it. But, like, I do like that. I just like that it's, like, he's getting gut punches from his mom in words, and Robin is literally pounding his face in, like...
Who does he say sorry to? Is he saying sorry to his mother for turning her into a vampire?
Yeah.
That's how I interpreted it.
I don't think he's apologizing for turning her into a vampire. I think he apologizes, like, right before he, in defense of himself, kills her.
Yeah. But I think it's more like
I think
general.
it's both.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
But so Robin gets a scene of him screaming, and then we cut back to Buffy and Giles. I don't know if you all know this, but apparently they cut for time, which is so annoying. Giles reveals in this scene in the original script, Giles reveals to Buffy that he killed Ben.
Yeah, I had read that it was a cut.
Really?
Yes, there was a cut. It was a cut interaction between them that led to her suddenly running away. Like they cut it.
Oh,
yeah,
it would have been so good,
right? Emily, don't you think that should have been left in?
Yes, but I'm sure they're editing it and they had to cut something, and it just ends up being very. I could make a few other suggestions if they want to go back in time and cut some stuff from this episode. But that's a shame, because they otherwise do a pretty good job in this episode of stacking parallels onto one another. The parallels between different people's perspectives of their parents, and parallels between, as you said, the fight and the hurtful things and all this stuff. And so the choices that a leader makes that are difficult choices that only they can make the sacrifice, and that they're willing to do even if they do an awful thing. That's what Giles did. So it was like, why isn't that in the episode?
Right.
Buffy should surely relate. Yeah.
Yeah. That always makes me nuts, because I remember reading that, like, after the episode aired. That was like a trivia that went out, and I was like, what? Why was that cut?
It's possible they cut it just because there's so many confusing plot elements in this, because, that goes back to the last season.
Yeah, I could see that.
But who knows?
Yeah. So, yeah, we get the, Giles, I forget what he says that kind of makes her realize that it's like...
I'm sorry. I just started laughing because I was imagining him saying just what Angel said and just going, "You fall for it every time." Like suddenly,
she's like, "Crap, I do." Yeah. Oh, and so the final thing his mother says before she stakes him is like, "All you ever wanted to be was back inside," which is like, ugh. And I literally, my notes say, "Oh, poor Spike. I feel so bad." And that's when we get he does say sorry, and we see him stake his mom. And they filmed that dusting just slightly different than the normal ones, where I feel like we stay on her eyes longer than normal, right?
And that was the one part where I did have a moment when I thought, is she trying to get him to stake her? Because she didn't look completely
upset,
ferocious. She looked tender.
Yeah.
It's a weird moment. It was enough for to create a strange ambiguity. It's also kind of interesting because it's a parallel to the big scene in the show where Buffy stabs Angel. So
and James Marsters is very good, and his poor sad face when he stakes her. Ugh, yeah. I love that. I don't know if we all know this or remember. Spike makes a joke about this scene in the final season of Angel, when Wesley has to kill his an evil robot of his evil robot version of his dad. Again, I love when I explain things and it's God, that sounds ridiculous out of context. And Spike's at least your mom didn't come on to you while you tried to kill her. He makes a joke about it.
Funny.
So I
look at that. That's growth.
Yeah. So I stay feeling terrible for Spike until this pivot. I gotta say, he's so cruel to Robin once he picks it up. I don't know. I feel terrible for Spike. And then when he's I don't give a piss about your mom. She was a Slayer. I was a vampire. And it's okay, well, relax on that. I don't know.
I was sympathetic with Spike in that scene.
Same.
I have to say straight out, I was I respect that because he's basically saying we were on opposite sides of a war. I didn't kill your mother because, I like to kill people's mothers. First of all, I was a vampire. I now have a soul. And he was he basically was it's a professional act, and she chose to be a Slayer because that's her fate and because that was her job. I killed her in a professional capacity, and he could have obviously been more gentle with Robin and say, I understand that you experience pain about this. But he was basically I'm not going to take responsibility for it the way that you want to. And it ended up being the theme of the show, which is basically parents are people, people with children, except with vampires and Slayers. But I mean, I think it was hurtful to Robin, but I actually oddly thought it was a pretty rational and justifiable point he was making.
The way I saw it was you can sort of see the catharsis here. And in my opinion, that was solidified when he opens the door and you see that he's still alive. He's sort of oh, I have now come to terms with the fact that I have killed my mother. I can see things clearly. Like you were saying, Emily, I can see things now in this context where I feel that I can move forward, and I'm not going to kill you because I understand how much it sucks to have moms die. But at the same time, my mom died in a much worse way, and I can, I've come to terms with that.
It is fascinating, though, because Spike is able to use this as a therapy session only in the context that he decides to interpret what his mother said as a purely demonic act and something that should no longer haunt him. And we can all sort of agree that that kind of rings true because the sexual stuff really did seem demonic, but it's probably also not true. And it's just a decision that he's made to be a more coherent adult. And I mean, that is the part of this episode that I think is so sophisticated that Spike would be able to mature and move on by basically convincing himself of something that's a lie, but a useful one, because it's no good to sit around brooding about those hideous things his mother said.
Emily, this is why you have a goddamn Pulitzer. That was going to be my fucking next question.
I'm so sorry.
No, I love that because I was thinking Spike's definitely just closing the door on this and a little bit lying to himself, right? And I was wondering what everyone else thought because I 100% but I'm on your side with that, because I don't think you can't just say none of that was true. I had a mom who loved me. Now, like, you sucker. Like, it just feels like, well, but
he's making a choice to not be reactive.
Yeah.
That was how I saw this, which is really interesting, because I think he even says when we first see him in like season 1 or around season 2, one of his first appearances, it's very clear that like he's a creature of id. Like, he has an impulse and he goes for it. He doesn't think about his actions. He and Drusilla don't think about their actions. And with this, it is sort of like a therapy session.
Yeah.
He is making a choice to do the rational thing, even if it's not entirely true, because he knows that like if he's still focused on his mother and on this and he doesn't get over this, his life is stagnant and this war is stagnant. So it's like he gets out of therapy.
Yeah. Kim, what'd you think?
I think that can all be true, and I think he can still be unnecessarily cruel to Robin. And I mean, I know we talked earlier about how the life of a Slayer is lonely, and they do this thing where they're like, I don't need your help. I am an independent person. And then part of what makes Buffy's team so good is that she accepts that help, even though, so all that stuff we were saying earlier. But Spike like really throws that in Robin's face about how like she cared more about the mission, you know, than him, than like her own son. And I don't think that was necessary for him to like process all the stuff that he had to process in order to, you know, be able to listen to the song and cure himself of the trigger.
Yeah, it's the bit where he's like, unlike you, I had a mother who loved me, and I'm like, excuse me,
that's too far.
I agree. I actually, you know, he was being cruel with that. It's also not true on several different levels.
Right? Yes,
that part's not fair. The part that did seem fair to me is like, you've got to understand, we were fighting on opposite sides of a war.
Yeah.
Like, she kills vampires. I have a special enjoyment of killing Slayers because I'm a psycho. But now I am filled with 30,000 chips and worms and souls, so don't blame me.
I did like that when they were fighting, kind of during when Spike gets the upper hand here, how he like grabs a light fixture and kicks him, and it was reminiscent from like one of those train scenes from the 70s. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
So also, I forgot to mention the thing I do like about before Buffy finds out his distraction, when she says to Giles, I'm in the fight of my life here. And the vampire's like, really? And she's like, not you, Richard.
I know. Poor Richard. Those guys, they're like the guys that die at the beginning of, like the little conversations they have at the beginning of Law and Order, where they're just like, it's just like a little thing where it's like these odd chit chats she has with rando vampires. They play no further role in the plot.
I did look up like what Giles said to like make her realize, and it's not anything that I think is like noteworthy.
Oh, really?
They're kind of going back and forth. You want Spike here even after what he's done to you in the past. It's different now. He has a soul. And then Giles says, and the first is exploiting that to his advantage. And then Buffy's like, oh my God, you're keeping me away. You're stalling me. And I'm like, I don't really know how she figured it out in that moment, but she did. That's all that matters.
Yeah. So Buffy runs to Robin's place. She finds Spike coming out, and he does, I mean, we talked about it, but he does say, I gave him a pass, let him live on account that I killed his mother, which it's such a weird line, but James Marsden's delivery is really good, and I like this Spike that's coming out more confident and didn't do the thing. But again, I still feel bad for Robin. He's like sitting there bloody and bruised and crying. And Sarah Michelle Gellar, I mean, I know we all feel this way, but she's so good. And I like how tender she speaks to him at first when she's like, a couple of years ago, my mom died. I found her dead on the couch. And he's just like there, like bloody and crying, like, I'm sorry. And she's like, I understand what you tried to do, but she's dead. And like, I like that she goes in there being like tender Buffy, but then is like, Spike is the strongest warrior we have, which like, I'm like, come on, Buffy, you're the strongest one. But she says like, try anything again and he'll kill you. More importantly, I'll let him, which like, oof. What did we all think of?
That was such a blow.
Right. That feels like also like she's like digging it in there for Robin. It's like, oh, you lost that fight. You didn't get the revenge. And if you do it again, I'll let him kill you.
I mean, she's playing general, she's got to keep her troops in line.
Which is funny because that's what the last thing Giles yells to her when she's running away is that like, you're a general. This is how wars are won.
Yeah.
Then she shows up and actually does the thing, but not in the way Giles is anticipating that she'll do the thing.
It's interesting. I think this is part of why I zoned out on this whole theme in season where everybody kept going, you're a general. I'm both non-knowledgeable about, and I'm not that interested in the psychology of what it takes to be the leader in a war, which is weird because obviously it's an element in the show, but up until the late seasons, it doesn't really appear like she's a general in charge of a war in the world. It more seems like she's a superhero who's been chosen to kill individual vampires who have various schemes. It's only in the final season that there's this really big ongoing thing about being the head of an army. But yeah, I mean, this whole episode is just about people all insisting that Buffy is the head of an army, but having different strategies for what she should do and who she should kill in her army.
Yeah.
Like, I'm curious about your take on this, and I watch everybody's take on this. Do you feel that you kind of checked out of the general narrative because you were so sick of the initiative soldier narrative?
No, actually, interestingly, I didn't have a problem with the fourth season initiative thing. I think there were flaws in the plot that had to do with the conception of, I can't remember his name, the villain.
Adam.
Adam. And obviously they lost, what's her name, partway through the season. So I think there are flaws in it. But I actually wasn't one of those people who didn't like the initiative. I actually was into it. I was kind of like, oh, the contrast between the supernatural and scientific and our government and these outsiders. I actually didn't have a problem with that. It's more about, well, part of it is that I actually found Buffy's psychology as when she makes fun of those speeches, I found those speeches a little irritating this season. like I remember watching at the time, like all those people gathered in her living room and she'd be like, I have a single-minded cold. Like, I know that's what the show's about, but I was just like, I don't know. I'm in it for a lot of the emotional aspects and the icier and less emotional that she became, and the more it became literally like reading a book about any, World War II or something, where it's about the generals arguing over what strategies to use, the more I zoned out. So I don't think it was, for me at least, about the other stuff from before. I'm like a defender of season 4.
Yeah, I can tell.
Yeah.
I did think
I'm also a person who likes Riley, so don't even get me started.
Yeah, if we get started on that, we're going to be here for a few hours.
Yeah, exactly. Wait, are you guys more into the because I realize this is very central to season 7, is Generalissimo Buffy.
As I've been going through season 7, I mean, the general consensus is that season 7 is not as beloved as the other seasons. I do find it to be one of the seasons that I don't remember the episodes as well, whereas like seasons like 2 through 5, I know every episode name. I know exactly what happens. Like I could name the outfits they wear. But I go back and forth. I was telling someone this recently that so everyone who's ever dated me has had to go through Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So every ex-boyfriend probably is like, yeah, now he hosts a podcast about Buffy and he made everyone watch it. And I do feel like every time I would rewatch season 7, I felt differently. Sometimes I felt like Buffy's being kind of an asshole. Other times I felt like Buffy's stressed. Of course she's being a little like controlling, and like everyone else is kicking her out of the house. Like no matter where we land, I'm always annoyed at them kicking her out of the house. But I go back and forth with the general narrative as to whether it works or it doesn't, and whether Buffy's being too lone in her loner bullshit, or whether it's like, but she is the strongest one there, so they kind of do need to listen. Like it's been different every time. I will say when we did Get It Done, which is a season 7 episode I do really enjoy, where she goes through the portal and the potential dies by suicide, she gives the speech that I could see both sides, right? She does the thing where she's like, I buried her. Does anyone want to say anything nice about her? And no one has anything to say. And she's like, Chloe was an idiot. And everyone's like, whoa, relax. And it's like, I get Buffy's annoyance that like, these teen girls just like cannot pick it up. But also it's like, but be a little kind. One of their friends just died. They're looking their mortality like in the eyes. Like, so I go back and forth with whether I think it achieves the thing it's trying to do with the general narrative or not. That was a really long-winded speech to just say that. Kim, what do you think about it?
I think I was the one that mentioned that's what she was doing. I'm like you, maybe worse though, where I don't necessarily remember a lot of the big arcs on this season. There's like certain parts of it that I do remember. So it doesn't bother me because it wasn't like memorably something that bothered me.
That's fair.
It's funny that is the problem with this season is that it's just a straightforward thing. A lot of people don't remember stuff from it. The fact that it's not memorable is its own problem. And that's true whether stuff abstractly works, which some of it does, or not. Like the show should be more memorable. And I agree with you. All the other seasons, including for me, season 6, actually, which was a whole divisive season, but I found a lot of it very memorable. And I think it's very powerful, and it kind of does its own thing. Season 7 doesn't work like that. It's odd.
Yeah. I remember all the Spike stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
And Andrew.
So then, yeah.
So the thing with me that, and this is sort of my hot takes, and I'm glad that we just mentioned season 6. The way and season 6 is probably my favorite season, which I realize is a controversial thing to say, but it really struck home emotionally for me.
I just want to, I literally am just chiming in to say, I back you up on this. I wouldn't choose it as my favorite season, but I think it's wonderful that you feel that way. Yeah.
So season 6, but for most of the time, Buffy is trying to be her old self and try to convince them that, oh, it's fine. She was in heaven. She, hadn't been tortured. When I first watched season 7, I didn't really, Buffy's personality change didn't make much sense to me. It seemed like she was colder. It seemed that she had to turn off sort of the part of herself that kind of made her a good leader to be the idea of this general. But when I watched it this time, it made me think, is this the real Buffy that came out of being in hell? Like, is this who she is, having been changed by that? She didn't let herself sort of be changed by it or display that she had been changed by it in season 6 because she didn't want her friends to be worried about her or feel guilty. So what do y'all think about that? Because did anybody else think her personality shift was noticeable or weird?
I did find her personality shift noticeable and weird. I think that's a very good argument for why it makes sense. And there is a level at which psychologically it makes sense, because the whole show is about the fact that Slayers are supposed to die young. And for somebody to survive that she has means that she has so many layers of trauma, including having died and come back, which is not supposed to happen. But then on top of it, just the many losses that she's had. She's tried to be a Slayer who's had relationships, and that's obviously just been endless tragedy and loss. And so there's an argument that you can make that it's like, yeah, this is who she would be at the end of the show. But that's hard to deal with as a viewer of it, especially because where does that leave us in our sense of the character? It just it feels deeply alienating in a way that's never really resolved for me.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you, Emily. It doesn't, like I said, every time I rewatch season 7, I feel differently about her. And it's always Buffy that I feel differently about, whether I think she's being too much, whether I think it's necessary for her to be too much, whether I'm somewhere in the middle, which seems to be kind of how I'm feeling this watch for the podcast. So I don't know. Because also we gotta like you said, Emily, like Slayers are supposed to die early. So like now, granted, in reality, she's only like, the character of Buffy is like 22 at this point. So it's not like she's like 30, but she feels way more adult than a 22-year-old would feel. And also like Buffy's seen some shit, right? So like, that's not crazy that she would be more adult at 22 than most 22-year-olds. So I don't know. I guess I don't know is my answer.
Well, the other thing about it is that I've always thought of the end of season 5 as Buffy committing suicide, which is really complicated because it's both. Like a lot of the best things on the show, and I mean, a lot of the best things in art probably are things where neither explanation suffices. Right. Like it's just a mirror. Like she makes a choice to save the world, but when you are a person like her, who's barely a person at all at that point, you just want to opt out because you understand that you should have actually died. And so it's this really sacrificial thing, and it's this Christ-like thing, and it's actually an act of depression. And so it is a little heartbreaking to deal with her character this season and feel how alien she is. Oh, I was going to say a really weird thing that I'll just throw in there, and I don't know whether this makes any sense, but I've been thinking about, I don't really watch a lot of DC or Marvel things, but I watched one of the movies the other night, and I was talking with my husband, and he was saying that somebody had talked about DC being Marvel being what if human beings had superpowers, and DC being what if gods walk the earth. And that makes sense as the contrast between the two characters. When Buffy starts, it's a Marvel show. It's about what if a human being, a teenage girl, a tender, sensitive, slightly ditzy cheerleader who has abandonment issues from her parents' divorce, has superpowers. But in the 7th season, it feels like it's a DC show because she's not really a human type of person. She's more like a godlike being who has an alien view of how things work and doesn't seem to have the same kinds of relationships. I mean, that's not probably a sufficient analysis, but I think it's part of the reason that her character feels different.
Yeah.
I still sort of think that, maybe that this is going back to a little bit of season 6 too. Like this is who she is now, that she was trying to find and reestablish, even though she was only play acting, like these human connections in season 6. And now she's sort of like, hey, do I need these? Like, is this connection that served me so well, these relationships, can they be sustained in this end of the world environment that actually does seem to be the end of the world? Or do I need to close myself off emotionally? Because that's sort of how she seems in season 7 to me.
Yeah. And she's much more like the character in The Wish.
Yeah. Just with better fashion, right? But so we end on a beat that I don't love, where Giles apologizes and then Buffy tells him Spike's alive and she kind of shuts the door on him. The episode has a lot of emotions for me. I don't know. I don't love bringing in a conflict. TV shows do this a lot. I remember being mad when The Office did will Jim and Pam split up? But then they didn't. I don't like a very ending conflict, but I know a lot of shows do it. Emily, I'm curious, as our resident TV critic,
I assumed you were asking me as the only defender of the Jim and Pam plot from the.
Oh my God, you are?
Yes, I have a whole thing about this. It's a crazy opinion, I realize, but it actually is very justifiable. And if I explained it to you, you'd all agree. But but I do understand what you mean about final conflict things. I mean, look, I've said it a million times during this podcast, but I don't have an analytical reaction to this. I just have a gut reaction. I wasn't that interested in this part. I didn't remember it very well. So whether or not it's justifiable or whether it's thrown in as we want to create a conflict. I mean, I'm sympathetic with Buffy being mad at Giles, but it's just one of those things where I couldn't even remember or get invested in. Wait, is it important to keep Spike alive? Is he your best soldier, as you say? Is this because you had a kinky relationship with him in season 6? What does it mean for him to have a chip assault? It's kind of confusing. So that's my gut response is that it wasn't something that I cared deeply about.
Fair. Ellie, how do you feel about it?
So I didn't, only through us having talked about this episode have I sort of realized how I come down on this question. It makes me sad because it's the continuing isolation of Buffy that we see that I would say is arguably one of the themes overall of season 7. It's sort of, there's a tension when you watch it because so much of Buffy up until now, the whole show is about found families and working together to, that you need the people who are normal in order to defeat the supernatural. And Buffy is just separating herself from everyone. She has to keep herself above the potentials because she is the Slayer and they look to her for advice and guidance. So does Dawn, and even Xander and Anya, and obviously, even Robin to a certain extent, everyone's looking at her, but she can't depend on anybody.
Yeah.
And the shutting of the door on Giles sort of, to me, symbolizes okay, this is one more metaphorical door to support and understanding and having a peer, having an equal that I've just closed. We could have respected each other as equals, but by trying to kill Spike, Giles has shown he still sees her as someone who can't be an adult and make her own decisions as a Slayer, that she still needs him when she doesn't.
That's a fair reading of that. Kim, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that those are all great points. I would say in terms of just the episode alone, firstly, I hated it because so many bad things happen at the end.
Yeah.
That to have this be the way the episode ends just feels bad. I was oh, come on. I just needed something more positive than everything that just happened. In terms of the conflict overall between them, like, I don't know, I feel like we talked about this before. Giles kind of deserves it.
Yeah.
I don't know about, and I feel like, you got to rewrite a bunch of stuff in this episode if you're going to change that. We are pretty close to the end, but I'm glad it's here and not like 2 more episodes down that we get this.
Yeah. And, we do get the bit in the finale where, like, we're just assuming, like, they're over it. It's the end of the world when he's like, if you want my advice. And she's like, I really do. Like, and that's it. And I am glad that it's not like this plot line of like them going back and forth and like whatever and blah, blah, blah. I'm glad that that's like kind of it.
Yeah.
And now with a fashion roundup for Lies My Parents Told Me, the season 7 costume designer, Matt Van Dyne. Hello, Matt.
Hey.
Good to talk to you again. Love hearing your voice.
Good to talk to you too.
So what do you have for us for Lies My Parents Told Me? I'm sure there are a lot of costume changes or wigs at least.
Well, there were. When reviewing these episodes, I go through and I recalled this episode, but I hadn't watched it in many years. And when it opened, I remember the night we shot that scene, the opening scene, which is supposed to be Central Park, New York. And I remember, I can remember where it was shot. It was at the old zoo in Griffith Park here in Los Angeles, not that far from my home, which is probably, I'd say, about 5 miles from here, something like that. But very far from our sound stages in Santa Monica. And I recall that evening vividly, driving. I remember what route I took to go to that shoot that evening because I thought, well, traffic's going to be heavy. So I took surface streets and I took Mulholland Drive. And I remember how beautiful it was that evening. Of course, here in LA in the wintertime, it's dark early. And I remember, how dark it was and in the night sky, how beautiful it was. And I remember arriving at the scene and I remember that they were already in process by the time I got there. My crew was there. Oh. And of course, the rain was being manufactured and all of that. What I was really thrilled watching when I watched that scene, which I do think the lady who plays Nikki was so good in that scene. Yeah, I thought how tender she was with the little boy who plays the young Robin Wood. But what I loved, and I'm not sure who directed this episode. Did Drew direct this episode? I'm not sure.
Drew Goddard wrote it, but it was directed by Michael Gershman.
Okay, well, the direction and the writing was so wonderful too. But then the direction, what I loved in that scene, and I remember those little rain boots that I bought for that little boy, and they show those, like they show up so well against the night, those bright yellow rain boots. And actually that was something I kind of stole from what another show I had done previously with the actor Haley Joel Osment, who later, became very well known, doing The Sixth Sense, and what a good little actor he was. But I remember buying something like that for him when I was doing Murphy Brown, and I thought, what, that would be a nice touch in this scene. And I was thrilled when I saw that there was kind of an emphasis on that by the director at the end, because your heart goes out to this little boy,
right?
And it kind of emphasizes he is a little boy, and that plays so well. The costumes, I thought, lent to that scene. And I have a note here of where I bought the lady who played Nikki. I bought her blue jeans at Macy's and her shirt as well at Macy's. I was something that I put together. Now, see, with this, I didn't really have to match anything, which was great, from a previous episode, a previous season or whatever. I could just do something that looked like the period, like 1970s. So that was a lot easier for me anyway to do. And of course, then we have, the flashback of Spike and his mother and Drusilla. And I wish I could say I think Juliet's Drusilla's dress came from Fox, as I recall. I have a memory of opening a box that it was stored in. I remember. It's a memory I have. I don't have a note of that. It's just something I have in my
Brain.
head. Yes, in my brain. And then, of course, assembling James Spike's outfit, that was all me. And I pulled his look from several different costume houses. United Costume, as I recall, was one of them. I'm looking at my notes here. I thought I had a note on that, but I don't.
Did you guys just have that wig in storage?
Oh, here it is. Well, now, see, I don't do wigs. That would be hair and makeup. So that would be something else. But I collaborated with them, on that, of course. And, here it is. I have Spike's shirt. I got that at Western Costume. And it's like a romantic kind of style shirt, that I wanted for him. That, and his vest as well came from there. I think the vest came from, United as well. Oh, no, that came from United Costume, I believe. But, and then just trying to pull together all those pieces, Western Costume, the suit, the pants, renting that. Those are rentals. For Spike's mother, who is her character name, Anne, I believe. Yes. I remember fitting her so well because she was quite a character. I'll just leave it at that. Someday I'll tell the story, but nothing horrible or anything like that. But it was just kind of a funny story, in the middle of all this chaos. But I remember fitting her, and I remember creating that dressing gown for her that she wears with the lace, and I bought the lace at F&S Fabrics. I have a note on that. It was $1.29 a yard. I bought several yards of lace, and I bought twill tape to attach the lace to that dressing gown, because the gown wasn't. It was something basically I took from a different period, but created to look like that period.
Okay.
It was
that makes
something.
Sense.
Yeah, I wanted it to look like that, and her little, little lace caplet or whatever that she wears on top of her head, that, creating that as well. But and then I have a note that I found gloves for Juliet Drusilla at Palace Costume, a separate costume house, and I rented those for $70.36. But of course that was fun to do, the flashback, of all that, and to try to create the period and Drusilla's undergarments, see the whole thing when you do period costume, it's the most important thing about, and my master's degree is in period costume. So
nice.
The most, well, it served me well later on, because the most important thing I was taught was it's all about the undergarments, because that is what gives you the silhouette for that period. And I have notes here about getting the right undergarments for Juliet at American Costume, United Costume. I think they went by both names, or they were in transition at the time. American United, something like that. But it was all about finding a bustle for her and all of the right pieces that would, really tell the story, of the period. So that was something I had notes on. And then I have notes about D.B. Woodside, where I bought his shirts, his blue short sleeve shirt that he wears I think that's the one that he takes off when he has the wife beater on underneath.
Okay, yeah.
And he's going to, do harm to Spike. That was a DKNY shirt that I bought at Macy's, as I recall. Yeah, Macy's. And the gray shirt that he wears, that also came from Macy's. And the hooded jacket came from Macy's. And the little boys, the hooded jacket for the little boy, excuse me, that's right. That came from Macy's as well, for the rain scenes. But I remember the rain scene very well. I remember it was pretty intense that night because it was so cold, and the actors were pretty much freezing, and trying to keep them warm with towels and blankets. And and everything you can imagine to keep them, from getting sick, basically.
Yeah.
And this was interesting. I had a little note. The hoop earrings that DB Woodside wears, I bought those at Macy's as well. And the zip front jacket that Dawn wears came from Macy's. And that was Marc Jacobs, and it was $128. And then I had a note on Sarah's cream, it was a theory jacket that she wears in this episode, I believe. I had a note somewhere. I didn't write it down, I guess, maybe. And I had a note for, here it is. Sarah's, yes, from Saks Fifth Avenue, the white jacket theory, and I bought multiples of those. I think we had 3 or 4 of those. And those were $175 a piece. and I got combat boots. I guess that was probably for the Central Park scene for Spike. Those came from CRC.
Nice.
There was a lot of costuming in that episode, but a lot of it was, with attention to the period. So that's what I remember most about doing that episode. And I had just a kind of an offhanded note about a vampire, a necktie for a vampire. I bet his suit was just pulled from my stock, but his necktie was a DKNY necktie. And that came from Macy's as well. That's funny. $55.98. Wow. But anyway, that's pretty much what I remember about that episode. Just trying to pull together the period to do justice to that era. And the flashback. But it's a really well written episode, though. It's great.
Yeah. Did you have to? Doesn't Spike wear the push pins in this on his shirt? Did you have to do anything with that, or?
I'm trying to remember. I don't have a memory of that.
All right.
Push pins in his shirt.
The safety pins on his shirt.
Yes, that does ring a bell. That's right. I do remember something about doing that, but I don't have any notes on that. Now that you mentioned that, I'd totally forgotten about that. I was looking at other things, I guess, when I'm watching. I was like, looking at things that resonated with me. But now that you mentioned that, yes, I did that. So, yeah, that's right. Safety pins. That's right. I do recall that. Yeah. Yes. I think there was a note probably handed down to me to do that.
Yeah, because that's what he wore. When they had the other flashback.
Is that right? Okay, then that came down from above. Okay. Yes. Okay, that's true. But I probably, I still have a lot of the videotapes. They would give me episodes to watch, of past episodes, past seasons.
Oh,
so I have that. And I do have a lot of the rushes from when we filmed these episodes. I have a lot of videotapes from that. I still have those.
Oh, nice. I can't believe you still have the VHS tapes.
Yes. I have them in storage. I have them put away. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I hope they hold up. Who knows? We'll see. But they came, VHS tapes, and they were given to us in red sleeves. I remember that, and and they would say, it would be interesting to watch them, because I'm sure there's a lot of outtakes on those episodes. I should look that up. Actually, I should have looked it up for this episode. I wish I'd had my script. I couldn't find my script for this episode, but I'm sure I have one. I'm sure it's someplace, but I don't have it with me at the time.
Yeah.
So. But that's pretty much what I remember of this episode. Yeah.
Nice. I mean, I love that you remember so much from these episodes.
Well, I try. I do my best, to stir my memory. But the memory of driving to that location came to me this morning. I thought to myself, well, I remember something about it being such a long drive. It was probably an hour and a half to get there.
Really?
Yeah, at that time of day. Yeah, and then it came back to me. I do remember. I remember taking Mulholland Drive, and I remember I took I had a way to do that. I could take surface streets all the way Mulholland to Lake Hollywood, down Barham Drive to Forest Lawn Drive to the zoo, and that's the route I took. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
I love that you remember that.
just to avoid the freeways because they would have been jammed. I mean, it just would have been, totally gridlock. So. But I do recall that, and I remember how wet that scene was, and I do remember a producer, John Perry, getting kind of upset because it was so cold and wet. I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
God, I feel like I will never figure out LA traffic. Every time I go,
oh my gosh.
It's like, oh, the lift, whatever, says it'll be, it'll only take 20 minutes. And then it's like, oh, there's traffic.
Well, that's what's funny because I think when I talk about this, I should mention, if somebody said, well, that doesn't look very far from Santa Monica to there. I'm like, well, yeah, as the crow flies, it's not. But boy, try driving it. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. From Bergamot Station, that's where our sound stations were over in Santa Monica. I think it was around 26th Street, maybe something like that. Close to that. Well, maybe 20th Street, something, I forget. But yeah, you have to navigate all that traffic through West LA, and oh gosh, that's intense.
There was once I was like 45 minutes late to lunch with friends.
Easily.
Yeah, and it was the first time I had been in LA, so I didn't realize that's how early I had to leave.
That's a stock opening line for many lunches is, I'm sorry I'm late, the traffic was terrible. That's always what you have to say. It was just like, you can never gauge it. I
had to look up on the map, and it was like, oh, you're only 15, 20 minutes. But we had to take the highway, and it was just...
Yeah, oh, that's funny. That's funny. That's true.
I remember being so embarrassed, and my friends, they were pretty patient. It was like people I knew from Buzzfeed, but they were like, "We do have to get back to work soon."
Yes. Yeah. But no, it's fun to look back at these episodes and just see the little notes, and like I said, I have these binders of where I purchase things. I hope that isn't too boring to people, but it's like. It stirs my memory, and then I see, oh yeah, I had to buy that for this little boy because he, there wasn't anything really available, in stock or anything like that. You have to go buy it and find it.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, just trying to make it relevant, and I thought the little yellow boots, I do think made it relevant. So
I think so too. Yeah.
It's very sweet.
All right, Matt. Well, thank you for joining us. You are a delight as always.
Oh, thank you so much. It's good to talk to everyone.
We'll talk to you later, okay?
Okay, you take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. And now we're going to give our closing remarks. Favorite outfit. Ellie?
Oh, it has to be Anya. Not even a competition. Anya with her polka dots and that swim cap of a beautiful hat.
Kim?
I'm gonna be the outlier here. I'm going to go with Drusilla because I have to. And I do.
You do love Drusilla. Emily?
Anya.
I'm going to agree with everyone. I mean, we said this mid-episode. There aren't a lot of standouts, but I do like... I like what Buffy wears. It's not my favorite, but I like it. Her I think you called it a peasant top. I think she looks cute in those. She wears those a lot this season. Favorite scene, Emily?
My favorite scene is the horrendously dark scene where his mother tells him in vampire form how she really feels. Because I just think it's one of the most spectacular, memorable, disturbing leaps ever on the show. And it was brilliantly performed with a whole bunch of layers. So that's my favorite scene. But it feels weird to name it as a favorite. But
it does, yes, but I love it. Ellie?
So I will have to say that is my favorite, but since Emily already gave a very, very good answer, I will say it's when it's Spike's talk to Robin. Because that is sort of I've used the word catharsis before, but it is a cathartic moment. He has come to terms with his mom, but also it's kind of true about what it must have been like to have a Slayer for a mother. Yeah. That their first priority is never going to be you.
Yeah.
And sort of seeing all of that be spoken and have it end not with Robin dying, but with Spike showing mercy. Mm-hmm. I think it's a pretty good scene. And
you are right. I forgot to mention that. we start on his mother saying the mission's important, and we end on Buffy saying to him the mission's what's important. I do like that. Kim, what was your favorite scene?
I'm going to go weirdly, since I feel like there's a lot of darkness in this episode. I'm going to go with Buffy's banter with Richard in the cemetery.
It is good.
That. We needed it.
I feel like it's cheating because Anya delivers these like 3 lines perfectly and it has nothing to do with the episode. So I love that, but I'm going to agree with Ellie, actually. I like not quite the ending, but the back and forth of like Spike's mom being cruel and then, Robin punching him. And the way that's filmed, I think is like really well done. Now we're going to grade the episode. Emily, I know you hate grading the episode, so you say whatever you would like.
I probably would give it lower, but I'm going to give it a B because, you see, I hate grading things. I can't figure it out. I'm like, maybe it's a B plus because no, it's a B.
Emily, you are the only guest I allow to not grade. You are allowed to not grade.
I've written so many pieces about not putting things on top 10 lists.
Yeah, I feel. Didn't you used to write a year end? Like
yes,
yes, I remember that.
But finally, I knuckled under to the pressure, so I might as well knuckle under to it here too.
Ellie, what grade did you give this episode?
I'm gonna give it a C plus. I think it doesn't quite meet B. The beats in it that are good are very good. The beats that are important to the plot are important to the plot, but altogether it sort of feels like it's an episode that didn't quite achieve what it was trying to achieve.
All right, Kim?
I feel like everyone else always gives it either like way better or way less of a grade than I think they're going to at the end. It's always surprising. Anyway, I'm going to go B plus.
All right. And Kim is the resident professor, so she is a harsh grader. I'm going to give it an A. Like, it's not a favorite episode of mine.
Wow.
I really feel like it achieves all of the emotional beats it's trying to achieve. So for me, that's like, even if I don't love, I would have loved more Anya, I would have loved this, I would have that, but I do think it nails all of the beats it's trying to nail. So for me, that's why I give it an A.
I would give it a B if they had left that scene about Ben and Gloria in.
Oh yeah, I wish they had
maybe B plus.
It's interesting because my B is literally because I think 2/3 of it is not interesting to me, but the 1/3 that is so good that it just pulls the whole thing up so much.
All right, well, thank you all for joining me. Thank you all for listening. If you like Slayerfest 98, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, anywhere else you get your podcasts. You can support us on Patreon. We've been going through the Harley Quinn cartoon series. I've also been going through Buffy season 7 with my mother, in case you want to know what a 75-year-old Puerto Rican thinks of the final season of Buffy. And if you want to follow us on social, we are at SlayerFestX98 on all social media platforms. I am Ian X Carlos on all social media platforms. Kim, where can everyone find you?
I'm on Twitter at Kim and Joe South.
And Ellie, where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Ellie V Hall.
And Emily, where can everyone find you?
I'm also on Twitter as Emily Nussbaum.
Cool. And we'll see you all next time. Bye.
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 Bye.